Tonight we're going to do Allen Ginsberg's A Supermarket California now, and I will do what I've been doing, read and analyze it. This one's not nearly as long. This is very much an homage to the great Walt Whitman, who is a hero of Allen Ginsberg, and a little on Ginsberg, who is a those of you who haven't heard of him, he was a member of what was considered the beat writers in the Beat generation. If you've heard the term beatnik, maybe a little bit might be aging myself with my young students here. But the beatniks were the sort of 50s countercultural sorts. They basically gave birth to those kids in the 60s. You see, with the dropping acid and all the bubbles and the bus and the Ken Kesey's bus and all that sort of thing. So all those kids, the peace, love, hippies, their forebears are the beatniks. Jack Kerouac being among there was a Neil Cassidy who was the sort of folk hero among them, although the least writer among them. He was more the muse for Kerouac, and then sometimes for Ginsberg too. Ginsberg was the maybe the most accomplished poet of the bunch, and you could see why somebody who was going to sort of they rejected there was a tremendous economic ascent of the post-World War 1950s America. You've got the invention of the teenager as we know it, by the way, really, and diners and drive-ins and all those sorts of things, and unchaperoned dating, often for many people the first time, for first time in their families, right? Disposable income for teenagers in a way that never had occurred before. You'd have a baby boom and a humongous housing boom. Especially coming down home from World War II. Don't forget, America made money during World War II. The invention of the American suburb takes place during this time. And also, McDonald's arrives, a lot of the franchisees. Basically, so much of America as we now know it is just sort of being birthed during this time. And boy, people are doing very well. They're all getting their little houses with, in the Levittown and places like that, where you had all these suburbs, which were presented as sort of fantasy world, but also some people found it to be overly conformist and just all the same. And you see, boy, go look at a clip of like a 1950s baseball game or something. You look in the stands, and all the guys are wearing the same sort of fedora hats. They all wore the same coats, it seemed like. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit was one of the famous pop novels from the day. And so there was a certain amount of sort of a sameness that people were also sort of agitating against, and Americans always have. And certainly the beatniks were somebody who was rejecting the rising consumer culture that they were seeing around them and wanted a more authentic life. This is Allen Ginsberg, the great poet of the Beat generation, and he's thinking of his hero, Walt Whitman, and imagining him as he's walking into a supermarket in California. And that is the title of the poem, "A Supermarket in California." And I'll read it once, and then I'll go through this one short enough. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman, for I walk down the side streets under the trees with a headache, self-conscious, looking at the full moon. In my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went into the neon fruit supermarket dreaming of your enumerations. What peaches and what penumbras, what whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives in the avocados, babies in the tomatoes, and you, Garcia Lorca, what were you doing down by the watermelons? I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats in the refrigerators and eyeing the grocery boys. I heard you asking questions of each. Who killed the pork chops? What price bananas? Are you my angel? I wandered in and out of the brilliant stacks of cans, following you and followed in my imagination by the store detective. We strode down the open corridors together in our solitary fancy, tasting artichokes, possessing every frozen delicacy, and never passing the cashier. Where are we going, Walt Whitman? The doors close in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight? I touch your book and dream of our odyssey in the supermarket and feel absurd. Will we walk all night through the solitary streets? The trees add shade to shade, lights out in the houses. We'll both be lonely. Will we stroll dreaming of the lost America, of love, past blue automobiles and driveways, home to our silent cottage? Ah, dear Father Graybeard, lonely old courage teacher. What America did you have when the Sharon quit poling his ferry and you got out on the smoking bank and stood watching the boat disappear on the black waters of the Leith? Okay. I hope this is still recording. My screen is frozen. I'm just going to keep going. So he starts out, Walt, thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman. And again, Allen Ginsberg is if not I guess at least a semi-openly gay man, which is not an easy thing to be in the 1950s, by the way. He certainly was among his friends, anyway. And again, as a gay man, he feels always sort of vulnerable and a bit frightened, frankly. And a boy reaches for and Whitman was, again, his literary hero, who he modeled his own poetry on, very much so. And again, he's got a copy of Leaves of Grass, a miniature copy, I guess, sort of, I think, tucked right like that, sort of into his shirt pocket over his heart. And he's walking through the store, and he's probably just going over the poem he just read before he walked in there. As he's walking through, and again, poets, he's dry. The muse is sort of dried up on Ginsberg here, and he's sort of frozen and he can't quite get to it. And he's trying to unstick himself, right? And so he goes in. And what is a poet always looking for? He's always shopping for images, right? Those symbols, those images, and that he can paint that can kind of mean so much and do so much for a poem. And so he goes in there and he sees the peaches and penumbras and whole families in the aisles, and mothers and fathers and children and things. And then he sees the cans, the gorgeously stacked cans of vegetables and soups and things like that. And then he thinks he sees, I see you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats and eyeing the grocery boys, which is maybe what Ginsberg is doing himself, and a bit paranoid, about it. And he hears Whitman, he imagines the questions Whitman would be asking if he was in this supermarket. And again, Whitman, has been dead almost 100 years at this point. He's, what would he be asking? How much are the bananas? Or some of it's obvious. But I think my favorite one there, "Are you my angel?" which Whitman was always looking for his angel. My favorite one is, "Who killed the pork chops?" And what a gorgeous little imaginative flight that is by Ginsberg there. That is what because Walt Whitman would have, known the man who slayed the pig from any pork chop he ever ate, probably, right? Or at least would have known the guy who knew him, and oftentimes might have known the pig himself, right? So to sort of see it all, cut into perfect geometrical shapes and saran wrapped or something, would have really blown his mind. So that was so great to put in there. But then after, he's just sad, Ginsberg, right? And where are we going? The doors are closing soon. He's imagining that the store detective is sort of looking at him. And again, being gay in America is to feel like you're always a little bit under suspicion at this time in American history. And then, which weird way does your beard point tonight? God, I love that, because Whitman was famous for that long beard, and then something about the beard pointing the way is just, I don't know, there's just something very, very, very beautiful about that. I can't, I'm finding trouble for some reason articulating. Something magical about that description. When we walk all night through the solitary streets, the streets add shade to shade. He feels cold. He feels like he's on the outside of this conformist society, right? And he's feeling even colder and more lonelier. His only, company, the long dead Whitman, right, who he does love, and lights out in the house will both be lonely. We will stroll dreaming of the lost America, because he's thinking, past the car, with the automobiles in the driveways, right, this consumerist sort of American suburb, and he's imagining a much wilder and more interesting America, especially that Manhattan, the fecund, and rich and noisy and just teeming with human life. Manhattan, the Whitman, got to exist in, and that's long gone, and it isn't available to Ginsberg, who is sort of grasping for any kind of inspiration here. And then, dear Father Greybeard, lonely old courage teacher, there's a very tendernesses bestowed upon his favorite poet. What America did you have when Sharon would have been the mythic ferryman that crossed the river Styx of which was the river of death, and brought you to the other side. So what did you live when he quit and let you out on the smoking bank and stood looking back at the black waters of the Lathe, which would have been the river of death? So he's imagining what What were you thinking, Whitman? After the ferment of death left you on the other side, and you look back on the America you just left, and he's wondering because he's thinking he's having there's something that's because America is in a bit of a mold. It's transitioning into the what it's going to be for the next 50, 60 years. And by the way, I think we're all now living in a kind of transition, something that's happening, and we're all kind of rubbing our eyes open and looking around, not sure what the hell's going on in this digital revolution we're all living through. But that's he's trying to work it out. He's trying to use his pal and his favorite and his love, Walt Whitman, to help him do so. All right, that was Allen Ginsberg's Supermarket in California, and see you next time.